All right, I'm gonna go ahead and apologize for the quality of this video up front, but this was a very impromptu thing. What I'm about to show you is an excerpt from a 2-hour long consultation that I did with a client of mine named Alan, who is pretty brilliant. We talk about a lot of things, and sometimes I end up driving the conversation in a consultation. I'll do all of the talking, and I will be showing how the math works and talking about this and that and going to different websites and using different calculations. In some cases, I get hired as a second opinion. So sometimes people just want to bounce ideas off of someone who they admire and want to hear what they have to say about the things that they are thinking. And Alan is one of these guys. I'll often sit through a half an hour um, educational session from Alan, learning about things that I have no idea about. And in fact, we'll do probably a series with this guy because he is an incredible wealth of knowledge. He's a solar installer. He has a solar company in Utah. And he also is involved with his family business, which is building homes, or excuse me, developing homes. He's trying to get them into more building. And his mom is a mortgage agent. And so they are all kind of involved in this home thing. And he thinks on a very broad scale, he has interviewed specialists in all these different disciplines as hired as consultants. I'm one of his team. And basically, I just needed to have you guys hear what he has to say. So right now, what I'm going to show you is just one tiny piece of what he knows about, which is the business of building and the business of building both affordable and higher performance. And he has some really interesting insights that I think you guys I couldn't not say, I have to record this and put it on the website. So here we go.
This is the reason I'm struggling with this building plan. You can redesign the building plan about a million times, and every time you redesign it, the cost goes down like 1%, right? And it turns out like there's no amount of doing that isn't 1% better.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's kind of where we're at. Is like we kind of have to just finish the building plan and build it, recognizing that yes, it can get better, but maybe that's what the next house is going to be, is a better version.
Yeah.
Um, but man, since we've talked, I went and met with a builder in my area who does not low income housing, but like lower middle income housing. So not your starter home, but like one step up.
Yeah.
And he wanted to build a 100 home subdivision. He has the land, he's developing it, and he wanted to work with me on building it low cost. Right. We did this core problem analysis, like why don't people have entry level housing that's affordable, right? And what we kind of came up with was this really weird problem where nobody could agree on who an entry level house was for.
Hmm.
Like, and if you don't know who your customer is, like, how do you design a house for them, right? And then the other problem was like, if you were going to build a house, say that is a $300,000 house, because it's roughly the price that is entry level in our area, you had to decide how to spend that 300 grand. And like just the lot, curb gutter, sidewalk, utility impact fees is like 130,000. And so you've got, if you're a builder, you've got another 130-ish to build the house, and then you mark it up 15 or 20% is generally the business model, right? And so one half of your cost is just curb gutter, sidewalk, dirt, utilities. That's not one stick in the air. That's not one yard of concrete. And then that 130 grand doesn't go near as far as it did 2 years ago, right? 3 years ago. And so I went and did this like analysis from 2019 until now. The average income in America went from 81,000 down to 77,000. So like we lost income as a nation, and interest rates went from 3% up to 6.5%. And every 1% increase in interest rates is a 9% reduction in buying power. And so you had like this swing where you lost 5 to 6% of your income, but your buying power went down by 40%. And so the exact same buyer with the exact same job in 2019 could afford a like 3,000 square foot house compared to now they can afford like a 900 square foot house. And the reason is like that lot cost also went from like 80 grand, including utilities and everything, to like 150 or 130. And in our analysis, like every dollar you get above the lot cost goes a really long way, right? So like you built a tiny house. Tiny houses are actually not that much cheaper than a bigger house, right? It doesn't
Yep.
scale down well. Well, this is the problem, right? Is if you had $20,000 more, your house is like wildly better than a house that's $20,000 less, especially on the low end.
Hmm.
And so that 40% buying power translated into a 300% reduction in square footage, right? So like we're talking 900 square feet instead of 3,000. The quality of the finishes is lower. Like we don't understand like how pernicious that reduction in buying power has been over the last 4 years, 5 years. It's so dramatic that it's almost impossible to build an entry level house, and it's definitely at least 2 to 3 times harder than it was 5 years ago, right? But like you have to get the house to be structurally cheaper by 30 to 40%, and then you have to get like preferred financing rates from lenders, which you can do. So my family, my mom is a mortgage broker,
Hmm.
so I'm fairly educated on that side. But basically, you can make like a deal with the mortgage company that if I bring you like 50 deals this year, you're going to give me interest rates that are at least 1% lower than the market. And the reason is they don't have to market for those, right? They're not out buying ads to get those customers.
Hmm.
And we kind of negotiated a deal to do that with our local mortgage lender. But that right there is like a 9% difference in the house price to the customer. But like going through this whole process, if so, so let's say that we fix this, right? We go back to 2019, Trump's in office again, right? Like, let's say interest rates come down and incomes go back up. What's going to happen is you're just going to end up with inflation on the house supply, right? Your cost per square foot is just going to skyrocket.
Hmm.
Like, you haven't actually structurally fixed the affordability because it's a ratio from purchase power to supply. And so, like, on the supply side, you have to increase the supply of houses. You have to build a bunch of houses so that as incomes go up and interest rates go down, you're not just basically selling them the same house for 100 grand more, right? And that's what happened in 2019. Like all the real estate on earth jacked up in price like 30% a year. It was just crazy. And it's
Hmm.
just because we had this crazy amount of income and these low interest rates, and we did not have the ability to build houses fast enough. Anyway, so I have this sort of plan of how you could build an affordable house. And like we went around and like talked to a bunch of people who needed affordable housing, and it turns out they're all my age. Affordable housing, like when we were talking entry level housing, we thought it was like 22-year-olds just out of high school who like got married young. Like that's the kind of person who really needed a house they could afford. No, it's 30-year-olds. It's people my age who have been in a long-term relationship and want to have a child. And so what we would consider entry level housing 10 years ago, and this second, third time home buyer would be someone my age 10 years ago,
Hmm.
is now the starter home buyer because the entire market's just shifted that you have to be 10 years in the workforce with 2 incomes before you can get even close to homeownership. And everyone before that, like there's steps on the ladder. So single family housing with a yard is 2 steps up from like a condo is the lowest level of like I actually own the home, right? But I don't have a yard. And then you have like a townhouse, which is like I own the home and I own the yard, but I like share a wall with my
Sure.
neighbor.
Hmm.
And then the step up from that single family house, right? And the difference in the buyer is a single family house is someone who wants to have a child. Like a condo is just someone in a city who wants to own something instead of rent. A townhouse is someone who like it's them and their partner and they want a little yard to do stuff outside together. And then like single family home is like I actually want a kid.
Hmm.
And so like we went and interviewed a bunch of people to figure out like what the difference was and who was willing to pay extra, because like a single family home is significantly more expensive than a townhouse because your lot cost is a lot higher. And they've got 2 incomes, like $65,000 to $85,000 a year family income. And right now that buys you like a 900 square foot tiny home on a lot. Like and it's not even like the square footage is an issue. It's that for 20 grand more, you could have a 1,400 square foot house on a lot. Like you could have like go from what I would consider like not something you'd consider a real house to like a real house. And the difference is like 20 grand, maybe 25. Like it's really small. And
And you're saying though that would be like 2%, 2 percentage points on the mortgage would need to do that to get you
literally
there.
2 percentage points would get it right. So it's the difference between a 6% and 4%. But there's kind of this weird distortion, right? Which is right now because interest rates are high and incomes are low. nobody's building. And so like I could sort of build for 15 or 20% cheaper right now than I could 2 years ago. And like at 2019 at its height, my build cost was 30-40% higher. Like it was crazy higher. And a lot of that was materials, because you get this knock-on effect, which is like if interest rates go down, every person in America's income or buying power went up. And so everyone in America tries to buy a house at the same time. And so that's what I'm saying, is you end up with this inflationary pressure, because we can build like 1 million houses a year ish. But if a 1% drop in interest rates happens, you end up with 2 million new buyers that moment. Like not like that week or that like that day, you have 2 million new buyers. And so you have to have this supply, the ability to ramp up your supply, right? And it's almost
Which is
impossible.
why everybody's so obsessed with this 3D printing and like,
Well,
how do we solve this
so
with the
so
plastic
this is the
instead?
crazy thing. Like if you were D.R. Horton, right? Because they're the biggest builder in America. D.R. Horton's ability to produce houses has nothing to do with how fast their crews go. Like they are not limited by how long it takes them to get a house from foundation to finished and ready to move in. They can do that in like under 30 days, and they can do it with like 30 houses at a time per subdivision. Like that, like if you actually go map out like how long per site it takes to frame a D.R. Horton house, it's like 2 days for the framing crew to frame the house. But like after day one, like the electrician can start, right?
So just to be clear, these houses that you're talking about in 30
Yeah.
days are not the quality of houses that you would like to build as a developer, though.
Yeah. So separate discussion, right? D.R. Horton, they value engineer really heavily, and they cut corners where they shouldn't, right? It is my understanding. It's like I've read a lot of reviews online for D.R. Horton. I've walked through some of their houses. They do a decent job. Like I'm actually not knocking D.R. Horton as far as quality of house goes. They do okay. There are some tract home builders that literally use like cardboard in some of their products, like, and any amount of water just ruins the structural integrity of the house. That's not what I've seen with D.R. Horton. It's a 2x4 framed house with sheeting. Like it's like a code minimum house, which is what most builders do, especially on the low end. And so, sort of the areas that D.R. Horton could do better as the absolute minimum, like uh, their HVAC systems are decent. Even like they do a better job of their HVAC than like if you bought a $500,000, $600,000 house in our market, your HVAC system would be a lot worse than a D.R. Horton system.
Hmm.
And the reason is D.R. Horton spends the money to engineer an HVAC system because they're going to build it 150 times.
Hmm.
And so like it actually works. Like,
Hmm.
but we have 10,000 square foot houses. In fact, we have all of the 10,000 square foot houses on Earth don't have a functioning HVAC system. Like it's like weirdly enough, it's not like a cost thing; it's an engineering thing, and they just don't engineer them right. So like the D.R. Horton stuff that I would change is it's actually a durability function. Their stuff wears out really bad over time, and so when you're trying to resell that house, you have to have really big home price appreciation for you to be able to sell it, and then like repaint, re-sheetrock, re-stucco, whatever it is. But it's not like I don't see a big quality gap between D.R. Horton and what most builders are doing today,
Hmm.
because that they're just not that low of a quality builder. They're actually doing decent work for the most part. Now they don't have ERVs, they don't have fresh air for sure, and that's a big deal. They don't have any of the things that I really like, which is like premium builds, and I want more premium features. But so we went through like this process, right? We interviewed a bunch of low income homeowners, or not homeowners, like aspiring homeowners,
People who,
right?
yeah,
It's literally like my
homeowner
I got a
adjacent.
homeowner, yeah, aspiring homeowners. Like my physical trainer at the gym, she's my age, she's married, she's got 2 incomes, no kids, but she would give anything to have a single family home with a little yard, a little privacy, because she's been like in an apartment for 6 years that she shares with her best friend from college, right? Like, and at an $80,000 a year family income, 2 incomes saving up, they're literally not able to be homeowners, which is crazy to me, because I was 18 when I built my first house on like a $45,000 a year income, and it was amazing. It totally worked. But I just started, 10 to 12
Yeah.
years ago. So you kind of have to attack it from both directions. So I had this conversation, which was like, what would you give up to own a house, right? Because you have to make the house cheaper. The one thing they won't give up is privacy. Like that's like the one thing that they would do anything to have privacy. So I was like, would you do a 2 unit house where like the upstairs was 1,000 square feet and the downstairs is 1,000 square feet? There's 2 entrances, and you rent the upstairs out. And she was like, yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat, as long as the downstairs was private and the yard was mine. And she's like, but if I could pay 20 grand extra and not have that, I would pay that. Like, I don't want to have another person living in the house if I could help it. And I was like, well, what if we didn't sheetrock your ceiling? Like, all right, let's talk about like, what can you give up here, right? Like, what if we don't
How do we get
sheetrock
that
your ceiling?
20,000?
Yeah, like,
Do you need cabinets or can we use boxes?
no, like open shelving, right? Like, how many cabinets do you need? It's you and your husband. You look like a good cook, but I don't know if you cook a lot. Like,
Right.
how much? Like, what is it that you could do here? And we started looking into post frame construction. So you're familiar with like pole barns, right?
Mhm.
And so post frame construction, kind of the beauty of post frame construction is it's really simple to build. Um, your part list, like on a normal house, you might have 150 cuts of different sizes of 2x4 cut at this angle, nailed this way together, right? With post frame construction, you're looking at 13, 14 total cuts. And the majority of that's just 2x6 girders. You've got your vertical post, which is the majority of your structural member. And then you've got your trusses. And so from like an ease of construction, it's dramatically easier. And then if you look at the total material order list, it's way cheaper. And we priced it out. It's like half. If you take the truss package and the sheeting and the framing and everything, it's a little bit less than half the cost to frame a house with post frame. So you're talking 20 to 30 grand less on a 2,000 square foot house. Like it's a big chunk.
Hmm.
It's that 20 grand she needs. But we ran into this issue. Like, if you have a framer show up, it takes them a day to set up. They're on site for 4 days working, and it takes them a day to tear down, right? And so if I cut the amount of labor in half, and now it's only 2 days on site, it still takes them a day to show up and set up, 2 days on site, and a day to tear down. And so you actually get this diminishing return of you went from 6 days to 4, even though the labor really was half the labor.
Hmm.
And so I went down this like rabbit hole, because if you go watch like post frame construction online, like RR Buildings, shout out, they're kind of the biggest YouTuber about it. They do like 6 of the trades. And the beauty of that is, because their buildings are relatively simple, they roof it themselves, they insulate it themselves, they site it themselves. And then you eliminate this switching problem where you have 1 day on site setting up, 2 days working, 1 day gone, because they're doing 3 weeks of work before they leave, and they're getting from like a foundation to ready for sheetrock and paint. They have the electrician come in the middle, but if you do that, you actually get the full 50% gain on the labor, right? You actually cut the labor bill in half. And then there's also this weird thing where, like, if you're a contractor, you pay 15% in insurance for whatever you're doing, right? And as the general contractor, I pay my 15%. And as the subcontractor, they pay their 15%, but we paid the same 15% twice, right? They had to pay insurance for every dollar that they did on the job. I had to pay insurance for every dollar I did on the job. And so if you eliminate a subcontractor and you do it as a general, it's actually 15% off the cost, just straight up. It's 15% off the cost. The number one problem for all general contractors is you've got 30 subs on a job. Like, for a general contractor to scale their business, they have to only work with one sub for each trade, but it's still like hard to manage those subs. And then you have like this delay between sub A leaving and sub B showing up. And if it rains in the middle, you're delayed a week. And so like there really is kind of a macro or a microeconomic case for your own crew on site does all of the work on site they can possibly do, except for something that's really difficult, and it's wildly more affordable. The problem is, like, what contractors trade off, right? So a general contractor trades liability by hiring a sub. The sub has insurance, the sub gets sued. That's the thought. But in reality, what happens is you get a lawsuit, the general gets sued, and the sub gets sued. Right? It actually just doubles up everybody in the lawsuit, and you have two insurance companies coming out with two different lawyers, and nobody saves money. Like, and you didn't actually shift the liability to your sub. So like that is like a bad argument for why a general contractor needs a sub. Then you have like this other argument, which is if I don't build a lot of houses, I can't handle the overhead of having a crew that relies on me every day for work, right? And so what they trade is like, I will make my house can be as slow as it can be, and in exchange, I get to use someone else's crew to come in, and I only pay them when I need them. And that's sort of the switch that happened in like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, where I would say like in the 70s you had like builder crews that were like general contractors actually did work on site. They weren't just construction managers.
That's
Anyway,
interesting. So is your dad buying this, by the way? Are you going to outfit your building company this way? What you're
yeah,
describing?
so yes, so our company, we're in the process of doing our first house, and then we're going to go and recruit other builders. So my brother David is a builder. We have this builder here in town that I'm working with on this 100 home starter home subdivision. And then I have my dad who does all the building here, and he's got 10 or 15 general contractors. But essentially, the deal we're making with him is we need those 10, 20 houses a year to be able to outfit our own crew and run them and be able to make payroll. And so our deal with each of these builders is we'll be your 15 subs. And you won't ever have to talk to us. Like, we'll just show up and do our job, and we'll
And you're
charge you
talking to one person.
you're
So
talking to one person.
yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, and we'll help you design your house, because we kind of have to take over some of the architectural role. And you have to work with our engineer. You know? But our deal with the contractors is we'll show up and do all that. We'll charge you 20% less than anybody else for all those subs combined. Your building timeline will drop by a month or two. And your houses will be amazing and affordable. And we won't work with anyone else in that area.
Wow. And how are you going to limit it to just 20 houses? How do you know people aren't going to snow you in with 100? I mean,
It's super easy to scale up, because all we're teaching someone how to do is measure, cut, and nail.
but
Like,
the extra sub work that you're doing, those like additional sub
yeah,
things that are not specialty, but everything else basically.
yeah. So, but my point is like you couldn't ask for an easier way to scale your business. Like an electrician, when they hire someone, and we have this in our solar company, when we hire an electrician, it takes us a year to train them on how to do solar. Like, but if you hire someone to do post frame construction, it takes you like a week, like 2 weeks. It's not a hard, complicated process. And we have like this kind of plan of, so say you get downtime, right? Which downtime is kind of the enemy. Our deal is with our workers. This is the deal that we're proposing. If we get a down week or two, we'll come and build your house. Like, it's like we want workers who don't have a house yet. Like, they're the same demographic. Like, they're younger than 30 and would like to have a house. And the deal is like, we won't do the 20% overhead, as the general contractor. But if we ever have a down week, we just have like a waiting list, and we'll go do your house next. And by the way, we'll build you a second house, same deal, and you just sell it as a spec. But that's kind of our
Wow.
plan of how to like make this not have downtime.
That's cool, man. I like
Yeah.
that.
And then I have this whole spiel about inspectors in rural areas, especially. I'm not a fan of inspectors, and the reason is, like when I was building my house, my inspector would show up on Wednesday once a week. And so, what happens if you fail your inspection? You need your crew on site for 2 hours after you failed your inspection to fix whatever they missed. But your entire project got delayed 1 week until that inspector comes back. And so you take like this delay that is cumulative, right? Is like my framer got delayed, so my sheetrock got delayed, or my insulation got delayed. But then you add the inspector delays of a week in between all of those, and it took me a year and a half to build a starter home. And so there's this weird thing where you can hire, at least in my state, you can hire a third-party engineer, and because an engineer is so much more credentialed, more educated than a building inspector, they can stand in on any inspection you want instead of the building inspector. And they're like not that much more expensive, because when you pay your building permit fee, you actually pay for like 15 inspections also. And so what we're looking at doing is having a third party engineer do all of our inspections, because I can have them inspect Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and sign off on what we're doing. And because we're doing post frame and these thin slabs, like we also can't have the local inspector come sign off on those. He doesn't know how to, they're not in the building code. Like we have to engineer it, and then we have to have the firm that engineer it do our sign offs. And you get this weird set of side benefits, which is you never fight with the inspector because they engineered it. Like you just have to build the plan, and you never get delayed by an inspector because you actually could, they showed up when you wanted them to because they worked for you.
Nice. And
Yeah.
the offset of the cost that it takes to hire the engineer
Right.
is more than made up for by the fact that you're not pushing back a week every single time.
Well, and then my point of this whole conversation was these general contractors are trading the fact that they cannot do more than say 5 houses a year because they don't have the pipeline, right? And so when they use subs, it actually limits their ability to build houses to a massive degree. Because if you're trying to manage 5 construction sites with 30 different subs and you're trying to schedule each sub in and out, like that actually eats up your entire year. And so if you go down to a single crew and you build at least 10 houses a year, you actually end up in a place where you can build 30, 40, 50, 60 houses with the same set of overhead, the same set of office crew. Like your operation and your job as a general contractor is a million times easier, and it scales super well. And so now you can actually have a mass production of homes in some sense, even if they're custom or semi-custom. Like I have a friend who's a general contractor, and he has a partner, and his partner's only job is to call and yell at subs. Like their partners 50-50 in the company, and one whole partner, his job is just to yell at subs every day. Doesn't do anything else.
Yep.
Like,
That's
it's
budgeting
crazy.
and scheduling basically are the whole, that's like most of it, right?
Well, the other guy's budgeting, right?
Yep. Normal people, I don't think suspect that that is the case. They think that builders build houses, and it's like, there's the administration and the bureaucracy of what we're dealing with here is substantial.
Builders fight with subs and inspectors, by the way, and clients. That's the
Right,
only thing
right.
builders do. And so we like went through this. It's like, okay, well, what are our other costs associated with this? We have a $60 a day cost of construction loan. And so every day you eliminate, you actually, it's $60 a day of interest that you save. And then if you're running the numbers of like, I have a crew in-house and I want them, how much do I need to pay them to make money and be able to produce houses? Like in a manufacturing environment, you'd say like, what's my cost of labor per house that's coming out? And it's however much your labor costs per year divided by however many houses you can build in a year, right? And so if you take your lead time and you make it take 1 month to build a house instead of 2, your labor can actually output twice as many houses per year, right? So your cost of labor per house cut in half, and then your cost of interest per house cut in half. And so we're like working through this process of like, okay, how many trades on site can we actually do? Because of what I'm doing, we can actually do the concrete on site, right, with our crew. And then we could do the posts, then we do the framing, then we do the sheeting, then we can do the insulation. We do the roof trusses for sure. We can do siding if it's metal siding. If it's stucco, we probably couldn't. Like stone, like veneer stone, super easy to do. We can hang windows and doors. We can hang cabinets. That's all super doable with a standard like framing type crew. And what you end up with is like a 3 to 4 man crew that starts on site and stays on site for 4 weeks. And at the end of it, the only thing that we're not doing is like plumbing and electrical. And they're there in the middle, right? Like we can be doing finishing while they're doing that.
Wow.
And we may not do sheetrock. But by doing this, you end up with a house that's just dramatically cheaper. Without having to give up sheetrock on the ceiling, Anyway, so we like worked through all that, and then there's kind of like this weird alternative universe, which is like, what if you want a DIY house? What if you want to do it yourself? And what you want is the same building plan. You want the same engineering. You want the same lumber package. You want the same part list, and then you want a YouTube video that watches us build every single piece of that. And then you want someone to ship it to your door with stamped engineered plans, because almost impossible to engineer a house that's weird, right? You have to have a very special engineer to do that. And we found out in a 12-week wait time to get them to look at your plans because they're busy. Right. And so like I have this idea, like I want to come up with these kit packs like we're building them here for people who don't build, people who have a full-time job, but there's a whole set of people who would do it themselves and save not only my 15 or 20% fee as the general contractor, but they would save another 20, 30, 40% by doing the labor themselves. And so now you take that $300,000 house, you make it a $200,000 house if they've got employment that's flexible, which a lot of people do. And they don't have to wait for interest rates to drop. They don't have to wait for that inflationary pressure, which kicks them on the back end. That ends up being an equity gain, right? So like that's what I've been working on. This is
Brilliant.
kind of the plan we're after. And the thing with that crew is if you can build a house a month, you need 12 customers a year at a minimum, right? Per location. And you have to have lots for that, right? You have to go buy 12 lots a year and you have to build them out. We found out like if I put something in your house that you don't like, so say I put like, say I tile your floor, that costs $10 a square foot, like it's super expensive. And say you didn't want it. At worst, I wasted $10 a square foot. So I wasted 20 grand. And at best, I wasted 20 grand. Imagine you actually changed it one day, like you took the tile out and you carpeted. Like then I charged you another 10 grand to fix it. And so the other thing we realized is like you have to have like the most basic house plan there is with 0 additional features until you have a customer. And then the customer has to pick those features, because otherwise you do this weird thing where say you add tile and now either you have a $30,000 penalty on the house because you added tile, or you've narrowed your market to only people who like tile. And so you end up like this two-edged sword. Like you have to have the most basic house plan with whatever additional feature the homeowner wants to buy. And you have to have the homeowner before you make those decisions, right? And they're not structural usually, it's like finishes. But that's what like a model home is for, is it has all the finishes. And it's like, yeah, the basic house is 300 grand. Here's what's possible. You really want brick around the fireplace, that's an extra 15. And yeah, we totally do that. But we came up with like these 2 problems. Like there's no houses that anybody can afford to start with. The builders don't want to do them because they have to pre-sell them, and that's not their plan. Like they want to spec a house and do it, but like you can't make enough money as a builder to spec a small cheap house and sell it. It's not worth your time, because you could do that with a $200,000 more expensive house and make a lot more money per house with your same limitations. So you have to pre-sell these houses. And then on the other side of it, you have to educate the buyer, because like entry-level home buyers have never qualified for a mortgage. It's literally their first time. And so like
messy process.
It's a horribly messy process. And it's my mom's full-time job, right? Is to help people qualify for mortgages. And like, so like there's like a marketing mismatch, right? You'll see a sign on the side of the road that's like 2-bedroom, 1-bath house starting at $399. It's like nobody could tell you I qualify for $399. Nobody has any idea what they qualify for, right? And so it's like you have to change your marketing. It's like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, $60,000 family income, 640 credit score. Like that is actually if you meet this bucket, you actually can buy this house. And so like you kind of have to change the marketing around it too, so that it's something that somebody driving past could say, hey, I actually could own that. So it's really interesting.
Alan, I love the way your mind works. You're like, and not only are you really systematic about looking at every single aspect of every single thing on these builds, but you also like tell us really good story. So I hope you do develop your YouTube channel, because like you're just, as a storyteller, you're fantastic. So that's just a tiny slice of what Alan and I talked about today. Again, I apologize for the quality. Hopefully it didn't bother you. You're still here, so you're still watching. Stay tuned for more. Make sure you're subscribed, because we will have Alan back on this channel to talk about several of the other things that he might have hinted at here, and things that you had actually no idea that he is expert at this point. So I hope that you comment below if you have anything else to add, or other questions that you'd like to have him pose. By the way, go over to his YouTube channel. Again, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, tune in next time.